Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the homestead. This morning we're going to be planting our tomatoes, and we're also going to be seeding some cucumbers. But before we do that, we're going to actually install some cattle panels that we're going to be using as trellises that these plants can attach to and give them some stability as they're growing. So if you guys have been following us for a little bit, then you know that we have placed this woven weed fabric all over our garden. And the reason we've done that is to keep weeds out. It'll also keep the soil protected a little bit, help to keep moisture in. So that'll help with the watering issue. Now when we plant things in the ground, because we've done this, and I know this seems like a micromanaging way to do it, but what we do is we burn holes into this woven weed fabric using this nifty little torch, and we drop the seed inside each one of those holes. And the reason this sounds like you're micromanaging it is because if you've been around gardeners, you know that generally what a gardener will do is they will dig their rows and then drop their seed all in that row, cover it up. So it goes a lot faster, right? Yes and no. When everything sprouts up, you then have to come back and thin out your plants so that you get the correct spacing. So you are spending more time doing it that way at that time. Plus then there's also the weeds. So even though this way seems a little bit slower, it is more time consuming on the front end. In the long run, I really feel like it's saving me time. So what I'm doing is burning a hole every 12 inches. And I am very particular with that 12 inch distance, and I'll show you guys in a different video why that's important to me. Using the torch and burning holes into this woven weed fabric instead of cutting holes into it actually helps to seal off the edges so that it doesn't fray and come undone. We're hoping to be able to use these for at least a couple of years, hopefully more, and so we want to make sure that we're taking good care of them. Now that I have all my holes burned in here, I'm going to just loosen up the soil a little bit on the surface. I'm going to add some of this Happy Frog fertilizer. This worked really well with my starter plants. And then I'm going to place the cucumber seeds just in each one of the holes. Something else that I've learned with plants that need to be trellised is if I'm seeding this in the ground, it is best to put the trellis between the sun and the seed. And the reason for that is that little plant is going to want to grow towards the sun. So if I'm putting the trellis behind it, then it's going to keep wanting to grow away from it. And yes, I can train that plant to eventually wrap itself around this trellis, but when those plants are small and young, it is way too easy to break them off. So it helps to place the seed behind the trellis so that it naturally grows towards it. So what I'm seeding here is just some Boston pickling cucumbers. I really like pickling cucumbers in my salad too. And because these are a little more versatile, so I can either pickle them or put them in a salad, I would prefer to use my space just seeding these instead of the salad or slicing cucumbers. And I'm seeding 2 or 3 seeds to a hole. That way if one doesn't do very well, the other ones will, and then I can always come and thin those out a little bit later if I want to. So you place your seed in just about a ½ inch, maybe an inch in the ground with with cucumbers. Press it down and you're good to go. All right, let's talk about tomatoes for a little bit. So this is what happened with my tomato plants. I showed you guys the videos. We started from seed, and they are super long and lanky. And the reason they do this is because they were planted so close together in their little pots that they were competing for space. Tomatoes don't like to touch, so they just kind of sprawled and grew really long. I am really not worried about that because tomatoes will actually grow roots off of their entire spine. So what I want to do is remove these bottom stems, dig a really nice deep hole, add some fertilizer, and then drop almost this whole thing, except like I said, just about the top 3-4 inches. I'm going to put it down in the ground. Now, because I want to dig a nice deep hole, I'm going to be using my handy dandy auger. So this is an auger bit on a drill, and I'm going to find the link for this and put it down in the description of this video down below so that you guys can get it if you want to use it. It comes in really handy when you have to dig all of these holes. So because I need more space, I burned this hole a little bit bigger. Just kind of move that mulch out of the way. Add a little bit of that fertilizer down in the bottom, kind of mix it in. And thankfully tomatoes are kind of forgiving because I still have a couple of them per spot. So I'm going to separate them. There we are. And just drop it, like I said, really nice and deep in the ground there. Cover it back up with the soil. Add a little more fertilizer. Now I really like this Happy Frog fertilizer. My plants did really well with it. But something else that tomatoes like is calcium, which you can find in your eggshells. They like nitrogen, which is in your coffee grounds. And they like magnesium, which is in Epsom salt. So I've also used those things as fertilizer before, and my tomatoes did really well. So if you want to kind of make a mix of those things, I just kind of added equal parts of all three and then mixed them into the soil, just about, you know, a handful mixed into the soil with each plant. And my plants really like that too. I am going to just sprinkle some crushed eggshells around the top here. And maybe somebody who's a more seasoned gardener can add something in the comment section of this. I seem to remember somewhere reading that crushed eggshells will keep slugs away from your plants too, because they don't like crawling across these sharp edges. So I'm not sure if I'm remembering that correctly, but maybe somebody can address that. So there we are, there's our little tomato plant. So here's something else that may or may not be true. I have a neighbor whose father-in-law, he tells me, used to swear by this. When you put your tomato plant in the ground, if you take a toothpick and just plant it in right next to the stem, supposedly that keeps cutworms from climbing up and eating your tomato plants. I don't know if that's true, but I figure it's a toothpick, it can't hurt. So we're gonna try it out. And again, if somebody a little more seasoned than me can add some words of wisdom to this, just leave that in the comment section. I'm really curious to see if this does anything. I don't know. All right, all of the tomatoes are in the ground. We have 46 tomato plants, all different varieties. I'm really hoping that those do well this season. So what I'm going to do on this side of the trellis, kind of in between where I planted these tomatoes, is I'm going to seed some basil. Basil is a really good companion to tomatoes. Parsley is also a really good companion. So if you're planting tomatoes, you may consider putting some of those sweet herbs in between those tomato plants. It'll help them to do better. And you know what? Somehow it just seems wrong to have a summer garden in the south and not have watermelon. So we are going to use a couple of these rows to put in watermelons and cantaloupe. Now, watermelons and cantaloupes will spread out a lot. So these rows are actually 6 feet wide. We're going to just use one of those sections per variety. So we have one 6-foot section that's going to have watermelons and one 6-foot section that's going to have cantaloupe. And those seeds are going to be spread 2 feet apart. So for a 20-foot long section, we're only putting in 10 seeds. I know that kind of seems extravagant, but believe me guys, we have about almost a quarter of this garden that's going to just be taken up by those watermelon and cantaloupe vines, and they will spread out a lot. There are 2 ways to grow your watermelon and cantaloupe. You can grow them on the ground like we are doing this year. Again, that does take up a lot of space. You can also grow them vertically by putting them up on trellises, like we have our cattle panels that we're using for trellises. That is an option. If you choose to do that, keep in mind that that fruit is going to get pretty heavy. So you can do that with cucumbers that climb, you can do that with green beans that climb. Those are not as heavy, but if you're doing anything like some of your bigger squashes or watermelons or cantaloupe, then you'll have to provide some type of support for that fruit as it gets heavier. Some type of a sling or just something to hold that and support that, because the weight of that alone is going to just pull itself right off of the vine before it has a chance to ripen otherwise. I am also seeding some corn today. I'm seeding Orchard Baby on this side of the garden and some True Gold on the other side of the garden. Last year was the first time that we had tried growing corn, and I really didn't expect to get anything at all. We didn't get a very large harvest, but what we did get was just amazing. It just tasted fantastic. So we decided to give it another try this year. And again, I'm seeding it just like I do everything else, which, yes, I know it sounds crazy, but less seed and I won't have to worry about weeds. But in any case, what we're doing this year is we're doing sequential sowing, I think is what it's called. So we're sowing 2 rows today, and then next week we'll sow 2 more rows. And we'll do that for the month of April. So every week we'll sow 2 rows of corn. And the reason that we're doing that is because there's a very small window for harvesting corn, and once it's ready to be harvested, you have to harvest it. So if we seed everything at the same time, then everything is going to have to be harvested at the same time. So this way, it'll space out our harvest a little bit. Hey guys, thank you so much for coming along. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you are planning on seeding or planting some good things in your gardens this year. If you are, would you do me a favor and put down in the comment section what it is that you're excited about growing? If you're not, maybe there's something that you would like to learn to grow. Put that in the comment section as well. I'm just kind of curious to see what our viewers are doing. I know right now this doesn't look very glorious with all of this woven wheat fabric down, but can you imagine in a couple of months when everything in here is green and producing a lot of good food? I know I'm excited about that. Hey folks, if you haven't already done so, would you subscribe to our channel right now? We sure do appreciate you, and I hope to see you again in a future video. Until then, y'all have a blessed day. Bye-bye.